It's funny today. I went down, I was having a nice little cup of coffee. Starbucks. I don't know why I like it all of a sudden, but I was down having a little Starbucks. And an old man and I got to chitter-chattering back and forth just like the social butterfly that I pretend to be. And he asked me what I did, and I said, the funny thing is about I'm a YouTube creator, and I talk true crime. I bring a little bit of my past and my experiences, and I discuss cases. He said, oh, really? What's the biggest one right now on the plate? What's one that everybody has to have all the information about? I looked right at him. It didn't take me but 2 seconds for it to fly out of my mouth. Idaho 4, Bryan Kohberger, quadruple homicide, University of Idaho. He says, hold on, son, slow down. I know all about it. It's huge. We both just kind of went quiet because neither one of us, which team you on? That was the funny thought that went through my head, because the very next thing, and it was already ringing in my head, like, what team are you on? I'm sure he was thinking the same thing, and out of his mouth he said, if it were like the Super Bowl, and here we are in Vegas, the land of placing wagers and bets, what team would you lay your money on? I knew exactly what he meant. Right off the bat, I knew what he meant. Guilty. Prosecution. Mainstream media. Not guilty. Defense attorneys. YouTube content creators that see the holes in the case. Who would you put your money on? What team are you going with? And he snickered, and I snickered. We both just kind of looked at each other. Neither one of us would even make the statement, because we already knew, just based off the beginning of the conversation, being in the land of Vegas, where he was probably an outsider from another state from afar, and me being here local in Vegas, but not in Idaho. But he heard the word YouTube content creator, and I knew he was mainstream media information fed. We just had to smile and part ways and walk away from each other, because we would be placing a wager on very different sides of a flipped coin. I'm ARHayes. It's Convicts Thoughts. And we come strolling back into the Idaho 4, ladies and gentlemen. The case that just won't go away. It's not going to for years upon years upon years. But the biggest question, if you had to go make a wager, and the sad thing about it is it's actually not a comical thing to even discuss, and I'm not meaning it in a comical way. But there's two teams that are at battle as we speak. Of course, you always have the state of Idaho with the prosecutor Bill Thompson and his team doing combat, heading towards trial at some point in the future, with the defense team of Ann Taylor and Bryan Kohberger and the rest of the help that they possibly have. But even more so outside of that, it's a bigger team spectrum, and it started from the very, very beginning of this case. I was going back through some of my old work when I was new to the platform, really green, really new at this. Not very good at it, to be honest with you. I'll admit that. I didn't have, the camera savvy. I didn't have the editing skills. I still don't. But I have more knowledge and common sense of where I'm thinking and heading in my thoughts than I did back then. But I saw a video that I did. Where I was actually frustrated and angry over the mainstream media BS that has continuously been poured upon people's emotions from the very beginning of this case. And now that I'm a little more seasoned and I've heard the different thoughts, the different point of views from the other people in the platform, some very intelligent people that make very valid points across the board, whether you believe he's guilty or not guilty, and the different ways that you project things. There is some very intelligent conversation taking place with many different thoughts and theories. And that's not a bad thing. That's open-mindedness. Of course, it's created debate and sometimes even drama. But the good thing is there's open minds that are thinking outside of the box. But then I formulate my thoughts back to all of the mainstream media that is still continuing to happen today. And I realize, does this case legitimately even need to go to trial? Is this not already predestined to what's happening? Do we not all already see it? I think we feel it. Whether we see the exact path it's going to take, I believe we feel it on the inside, and we're just all fighting it with everything that we have emotionally in hopes that at some point the idea of fair trial begins to take place. Actual real and true justice comes into perspective and we see it begin to happen. But right now I think it's a divided room, a divided flip of a coin, a divided, if I had to go wager everything I had on what was going to actually transpire and what team guilt, team not guilt, how is this going to actually move forward? Because the way we're watching it now, the boots are on the ground, the feet are digging into the sand, and we're watching some very interesting, unusual things happen within this case. We have a complete gag order in this, in the fact it is such a stringent gag order that even those that are not gagged, that are not a part of that gag order, won't speak. The entirety of this case is non-transparent. No detail is confirmed or unconfirmed. No evidence is validated or not validated. Even when it's stated by one team as actual fact and truth, like the prosecution stating that it's this year of a white Elantra and it's this individual's DNA on a sheath button, and there are so many questions that just have not been answered and possibly never will be. But we've watched the continuous battle transpire between mainstream media when any time a hearing or a court appearance comes and is visually before us, which now, of course, is all being handled internally by the court and the judge himself's live stream to ensure that the cameras only show what they deem acceptable to be shown. The control factor within this case has gotten to the point, and this is where I become very, very vigilant, that I don't see any chance of a fair trial happening. At one point, The defense had an expert in regards to IgG DNA information on the stand testifying. And literally moments after her testimony finishes, the prosecution has the FBI at her home interviewing her, a defense witness being interrogated by the FBI in question. And now, as we get to the point that the IgG is needed to be reviewed by the defense team, as the judge finally deemed it necessary, that the prosecution turns over some of that information. So, of course, the defense needs their experts to go over it. What do you think? Bryan Kohberger and his lawyer are experts in IgG information? Of course, they need their actual experts to be able to review that. And somehow the court is going to limit that to only a certain things that they could see. Yet, one of the major key defense experts that was involved and on the case is no longer involved after being harassed by the FBI and the prosecution. Go figure. Wouldn't it be amazing if this actually made it to trial and Gabriela Vargas or Vegas or whatever her name is testifies for the prosecution just out of the blue? Imagine that. Imagine that happening. But that's not even just it. That's not even it. The whole craze that everybody heard 400 witnesses thinking these are all people that are going to be a part of the trial. Guys, come on, slow down. Common sense. It's not even possible. I know, I need to do a video that's going to break down the differences of witnesses for the prosecution, those that will actually be in the trial, those that just gave up information that led to other witnesses. There's so much that possibly goes on that not all 400 witnesses that Ann Taylor states that are within this case are going to be a part of this case when it gets to trial. It's not what she meant. But the teams are clearly set, and they have been from the beginning. And I actually think if you look at the Idaho 4 case, it's already being tried outside of the courtroom. Bryan Kohberger has been on trial since the day he was arrested. His name was released within the actual media spectrum, both mainstream and now YouTube and TikTok and the various platforms out there. The trial has already been happening. So now when the defense actually puts in a motion for a change of venue, because they definitely need to get this out of Latah County, but of course the prosecution puts up a major objection to that. And what's the whole reasoning for that? First of all, does anybody truly believe that moving this trial is going to make an actual difference in the jury pool and the way this is ran through the court? Nothing's going to make a difference within this case or this trial till it gets to the Supreme level. Supreme Court hearings and the appeals being heard within the Supreme Court. This state level stuff that's happening right now is all for show. I hate to say that because it's a man's life on the line in a sense. But those with common sense can see the problems not only with the evidence of the case and the possibility that some of it just isn't correct or strong enough to prosecute this individual with. But we see how this is all playing out. This is a mainstream media trial before it even gets in the courtroom. I mean, heck, with the evidence that's already been released by mainstream media, there's no way he could possibly be innocent. It's his car. He ordered a knife on Amazon. He received it 7 months prior. He interacted with the girls on social media prior to the events happening. He had a clad in black uniform with receipts and everything from Walmart in his apartment. There's so much that mainstream media has put out there. He's got IDs of people all over the place, including in a glove in a box in his closet of his parents' house. And he was bagging green leafy stuff up at 2 o'clock in the morning to put in the neighbor's trash can. I mean, this man is guilty as all could be guilty if you just go by the mainstream media. Everything that they put out is just a nail in the coffin for Bryan Kohberger. That's what our country's become when it comes to our judicial system. Heck, if mainstream media's got a little bit of an idea of something you did wrong, well, the hell with it, you're guilty. Why even go to trial? Send that man right off to the firing squad. Let's high five the victims' families and everybody else on the way to get there, because we just saved them a little heartache that they might have to wait 6 months for a proper trial to be conducted, or a year. Maybe even an investigation into the correct people. Somehow, some way, even at the beginning, the Gonzalez had major questions in regards to the way the investigation and everything was being handled. But lo and behold, even with a gag order and everything within the case, now they've gotten to the point that every time we have a hearing, they go on national TV and do another sit-down interview with mainstream media about more evidence and more reasoning that this case doesn't even need a trial. They got the right guy. Even when the investigation didn't even do enough due diligence to go through the trash within the home appropriately to see if there was any evidence. Or the fact that they removed personal belongings from the home in a U-Haul truck probably before the crime scene was ever even released properly as evidence itself. But we have to ensure the victims' families are 100% okay emotionally based off of, all that's going on in this case. We know it's tragedy. I mean, we all want justice for Kaylee, Maddie, Ethan, and Xana. Even for the families like Kara, who's up there battling for her own life right now. We got the Gonzalez that are missing one of their daughters to the fullest. The Mogans and the Chaplins don't even want to get into the view of the cameras because they're trying to handle this case the best way they know how, and the loss of their loved ones. But so many, like this individual that I was pretty excited to have a little cup of coffee with this morning at Starbucks, who truly, just through the glimmer of his eye, already knows that mainstream media has this guy ready for the firing squad. Even when the evidence doesn't fully add up or make sense, because either A, not enough of it's been released for people to fully put together what truly did happen based off of factual evidence, or two, the lack of evidence that was actually filed within the motion to dismiss, along with prosecutorial misconduct, that we'll never get to see or hear what any of that possibly was, because they'll never make that available to us. Just kind of like, they don't want to release the 911 call, or even a body cam footage of him getting a seatbelt ticket, Bryan Kohberger, a couple of months prior to the crime actually happening. But it's like a WWF tag team match. You literally had the prosecution in the state of Idaho tag teaming with mainstream media and the victims' families against the defense, who's most likely trying to utilize the chaos that YouTube creators, TikTok creators, and the social media platforms are stirring up with the lack of evidence and the lack of knowledge about this case. It's clear what's happening. Why are we even going to go to court? Why do we need a trial? And this coming from a man that looks directly at the justice system and wants to hold them accountable, because I've sat at that defendant's table and I know what it feels like. I know the stresses of it. I know the feeling that you get when you're being judged prior to even the evidence being put out there. I get all that. But at the end of the day, does any of this have a feel of a legitimate, fair trial sitting before us? Whenever it may happen. Does anybody have a gut feeling that the truth is going to actually be told at any point? Ever? By anybody? By anybody. I mean, hell, you even have to look at the motions filed by the defense counsel in regards to the dismissal and scratch your head and say, that was the best you could come up with? I could have wrote better than that, ladies and gentlemen. I could have wrote better than that. Now, we don't know what happened in the legitimate part of that dismissal hearing of the prosecutorial misconduct when it comes to the grand jury indictment and some of the lack of evidence claims that were placed in there. That's the legitimate stuff we want to hear and know, and we'll never see evidence to any of that. Never. We have to try to figure out the truth by sorting through an entirety of non-transparent garbage that's either being released by mainstream media or a back and forth deliverance through motions to the court that are not giving any factual basis to them other than just the words on the piece of paper. And this is going to be the entirety of the Idaho 4 case, and this is where it's frustrating. And we could all scream to the skies that we want to see the transparency. We want to see this case handled appropriately. And do you think we're going to be heard? Because right now it doesn't even seem like Ann Taylor or Bryan Kohberger are being heard. And if they are being heard, they're just being put to the side, as if this trial has been predetermined to make everybody feel good before we even get in a courtroom. And that's why I make the clear statement, and it's my opinion, but I feel pretty strongly within it that this case is going to be battled at the Supreme Court level during appeals, far more so than we're ever going to see it battled at the state level. I would have to probably not lay a wager on the team I'm rooting for in this scenario. Not even so much rooting for, because I don't root for anything other than real and true justice being found. And unfortunately, at this point, I couldn't lay a wager on that in the Idaho 4 Bryan Kohberger case. ARHayes, Convicts thoughts. Just thoughts that were running through my head tonight as I sat and I thought of all of you, and I appreciate you, and thanks for tuning in. We'll talk again soon.